So may I welcome you all people to the scariest session of the evening. My name is Sandesh and I am from Bollywood Crypt. This is Yogesh Chandekar who made Munjia and Monica Oh My Darling. Deepak Ramsey from the Ramsey family. We have Patrick who made Ghoul and Betal. And we have Smita Singh who's the writer for Sacred Games and also Cough, one of the really great series on Amazon. So let me begin by saying this. Most movie producers hate horror films until they realize how they can make money out of it. So today, horror, as you all might know, is a very well-recognized genre in India. It took a lot of time to get to where it is. You all know how the business is right now with Stree and Munja and all these movies raking into so much money. So my first question to the panel is, why do you think horror connects so powerfully, and what universe appeal does it have to the people in India and around the world?
Start.
I think personally for me, what works in horror is that it allows me to dig really deep. I think the answer is also in the question itself, that fear is a very universal emotion. Fear is actually a very democratic thing, you know. You have it everywhere, everyone feels it. It is something you can do in terms of cinema, in terms of storytelling. You just have to, you don't even need a star, you don't even need anything big. I mean, you need to be able to dig into that primal emotion. And there's always been, I mean, you imagine sitting around a bonfire, you know. You imagine feeling safe. From a child to when you're growing up, the idea of listening or reading a really spooky, scary story is actually very comforting. You know, there's something about horror which is controlled chaos. You want to experience thrill, you want to experience fear, but you want to experience it in a way which is safe. So I think that is one of the reasons why people go in for this ride. You know, it's thrilling, it's exciting, it allows you to experience danger while really not putting yourself out there, you know.
Patrick?
Well, I think also the other thing to bear in mind is that with horror, I feel like human beings around the world find the same things pretty much scary, right? The difference from culture to culture is in the details and the nuance and the idiosyncrasies. But as human beings, we find the same things scary. So you can, as a horror fan, enjoy an offering from South Korea, you can enjoy an offering from India, you can enjoy an offering from the UK, from South America. That's why I feel like you get the most voracious horror fans around the world. It's because they're all linked by this same kind of horror grammar. And that, to me, is something that's so exciting about horror. It's a unique genre in the fact that it can travel so well, and it often does, which is a very exciting prospect for me as a foreigner living in India, that I might be able to tell an Indian-based story that also might appeal to people back home.
Deepak?
Yeah. I think horror is something that you don't experience every day. You might have a comic situation at work, or you might have a romantic angle with your girlfriend or your wife, but horror is something that you only experience with good cinema. You're watching a film late in the night and you're alone, and suddenly from your screen you turn to the bedside to see if someone's actually there. I mean, it's an emotion that you don't get to experience otherwise. So that's why I think it's very universal. It connects well. It's very interesting. Something that people want to see it. And good horror is something what people want to see.
Yogesh?
I mean, they've said most of the things I wanted to say, but I would like to add that the one other aspect I feel that attracts people to horror is that we humans have a very innate curiosity. We always want to know, if there's something in the darkness, we're scared of it, but we want to know ki kya hai andhere mein. So horror, like, films, stories, they make us experience or like try to, like, they help us discover what's there in the darkness, but without getting harmed. Like as Seema said, like, there is a security of like watching it from afar. It's like watching this ferocious tiger from outside the cage. So that feeling of, somewhere like, finding out what's in the darkness, but without the threat or harm of it, is something that draws us to horror. At least that's something that draws me to horror.
So in short, I think it's like a roller coaster ride where you're strapped in and you experience the thrill of riding the ride without actually getting into harm. So I would like to know, as being an Indian, how much does mythology and religion play a part in constructing horror movies or films, and what is your opinion, Smita?
See, I mean, there is something about belief. When you look at horror, you believe in goodness, you believe in God, and you believe in evil, you believe in Satan, you believe in Shaitan. There is always there is a war. I think we are torn between what is good for us and what is bad for us, what is nourishing and what is dangerous. So I think in every culture you have this dichotomy. In every culture you have some place you go for comfort. There is some place you feel fear, you feel discomfort, you feel immoral, you feel something is dragging you down, you feel the heaviness and oppression. And I think wherever you may want to dig that feeling from, whether it is mythology, whether it is the current political situation in your country, you can dig it from folklore, from mythology, I dig it from the here and now. For me, horror is visceral, it's real, it's from the everyday. For me, horror is more like, say, Ram Gopal Varma's Bhoot, where there is this wife who's living in a flat, or who's living in isolation completely, and her mind starts to act and it starts to play, and the isolation starts to play. She starts to see and feel things. She wakes up in the middle of the night. There is a deterioration of her psyche that happens. That interested me a lot, that you don't have to go to mythology, you don't have to go to folk tales, you don't have to go to that part. But I think there is something about Indian stories which is connected to horror in a very interesting way, which I've started to notice now, which is morality tales. We are very moral. Our ghosts also, as Mr. Ramsey would know, there is revenge, there is justice, there is some kind of morality. There's a moral question, I think, somewhere in horror that really interests me, because someone is hurt and someone seeks vengeance. I think for me that is a very interesting part. And I think right now, wherever we are, I think people respond to horror. Again, I'll go to Bhoot, because we were all spreading out. We were all getting out of our homes. We were leaving our tier 2, tier 3 cities. We were moving out. Women were getting married and you didn't have a social structure. They were leaving it behind, and therefore Bhoot kind of clicked. Everyone felt that isolation. I think now what we really need to do is, and we don't really need to do, but I think all stories that impact people are things that they really want expressed out there, So I don't think India as a country will ever lack for horror stories, Comes from within us.
Patrick, being from the UK originally, do you feel, how does it resonate with you?
Well, just from my point of view, like, of course, India as a country has 10 different ghost stories per village. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's a country that's rife with folklore, with fascinating mythology from many different religions and many different cultures. So it's a country that's ripe with horror, and horror that we haven't necessarily seen in other countries where it's more familiar. So, for example, if I'm from England, how many haunted mansions have I seen? How many haunted old castles have I seen? And it's usually some kind of Christian mythology, some kind of ghost. But in India, there's such a variation, which I find really fascinating. But I think from my kind of process, I would find something that interests me topically to do with today's world, and then kind of retrofit a myth to make it work. I think it is the way to live. And the good thing about Indian mythology and folklore is you've got so much to choose from, I think.
Deepak, I mean, coming from the old days, how does it, I mean, what were your thought processes while making the horror movie? Did it involve religion or any kind of social, you know?
Yeah. Hello. Actually, yeah, we did have always the creature that was always overpowered in the end by either the sign of God, or whether basically good over evil. So yes, I would say mythology plays a very important part as far as Indian horror is concerned, because you need your audiences to connect. The belief has to connect, whether it's a Dayan or it's a creature from the past who gets resurrected, to create that feel that it's real and it's out there somewhere. Maybe you haven't seen it. You need to get that mythology angle or maybe that belief angle.
I would think the whole second tier cities, or they would probably relate more to it because, you know, there's wilderness around the place and stuff like that. Was that in the mind?
Yeah, that was always helpful. And moreover, we tried to shoot at real locations. There were times when we would, because of budget restraints, we would shoot in real graveyards. I mean, believe it or not, in the middle of the night, it's like the seven brothers walking into a graveyard with a unit and with a terrified heroine. And we actually digging up a corpse, which was accidentally digging up a corpse, and everybody was screaming, including the brothers.
This was Do Gaz Zameen Ke
This was
Neeche.
Do Gaz Zameen Ke Neeche. And believe me, it all started there.
Yogesh, again, you also mentioned that you came from a small town.
Yeah.
So how did these movies or you know, the folklore influence you as a writer and you know, as a filmmaker in the?
I mean, see, most of us kind of come from families wherein, like, you know, religion, culture, they are ingrained in us right from the childhood. And that even includes like superstitions and, like, you know, folk stories about yaar people ke ped ke niche mat jao, ye ho karo mat karo, and all that, those kind of things. So it's always within us. Like, even in our mythology, if you see, it's quite gruesome. Like, I mean, you think of Bakasur, there's a demon, usko khilayega nahi to he'll go and eat an entire village. Now just imagine him eating an entire village. That's like the most horrifying thing you can see. And even our gods are horrifying. Like, if you look at, say, like the new animated Narsimha, take out the religion, it's actually a creature film. Like, I mean, he's just dismembering people around. So it's all there inside us. And when, as we grow up and we see these horror films, somewhere it kind of, you know, activates those ingrained kind of sensors, and we kind of find some kind of a connection with them. It kind of takes us back to our childhoods when we used to take these things seriously. And some of the people, I think, even today, they'll take it seriously.
So I just will continue with you again.
Yeah.
Do you think Indian horror has its own identity, or do you think it's heavily borrowing from the Western world?
I think we have had phases, like when the Ramses used to make horror films, it definitely had an identity. Like, you see like this Haveli and a Thakur and that, you know, Dulhan Ki Bali and a Shaitan, you know it's an Indian horror film. But then gradually, I think as we came to the 90s, we started borrowing heavily from the Western film. So we had like Possessions and Hauntings. Some Padri used to come and like in The Power of God. We actually started becoming more derivative. In today's sense, we are in a position where we are trying to get back our own niche. Like, for example, if you look at a Japanese horror film, even if you see a talkie film of two characters talking, you can exactly point ye Japanese horror film hai. Or an Indonesian horror film, if you're watching, you can identify that it's an Indonesian horror film. I think we are yet to reach that point, but we were definitely there when, like in the 80s, we had like the heydays of the Ramses. But somewhere now, even now, if you look at it, like with the current speed, especially after Stree and Tumbad, like when we have started tapping into, you know, local stories, folk stories. So we again have gone back to that Sari Pehni Hui Ek Dayan Hai, or like a Munja, or like, those folk kind of creatures which kind of bring those elements back. But I think to get into identity, specific identity, more films of this sort have to come out, and they have to kind of evolve in a way that they have their own personality, I feel.
Patrick, do you have something to add? I mean, being from the UK, do you think Indian movies heavily borrowed tropes, Western tropes?
I don't know. I maybe, but I sometimes don't know if it's like if there's that much value to be put on what's taking from what, because since the beginning of cinematic history, everything's been feeding off each other, right? So if Japan reinvented horror at the end of the 90s and the Americans kind of took it, and then it kind of gets passed back, and this, it's give and take across the board, I think, with cinema. When I see Indian horror now, I think this is very much Indian horror, right? Personally, originally from the UK working in India, I would like to see a more Western style of horror do well at the box office and do well around the world. That's my ambition personally, because I feel again, just going back to the huge amount of folklore and mythology and stories on offer from India, I want to see those stories translate across the world, and maybe in order to do that, you might have to borrow a little more from a Western structure or certain Western tropes that we're familiar with. And I think the cliche that you hear again and again in pitch meetings or production meetings is, look how well Conjuring 4 did in the cinema. Why can't we do a Conjuring 4? And I think that is a extremely important question, and one that hasn't really been answered yet.
My next question is to, Smita. Being a creative person, a writer, horror has become a very good investment now, for movie producers to put money into. What makes it a reliable investment?
I think firstly you're talking to a writer who's...
No, that's why I purposely asked you.
No, so right after I did Cough and it came out, there were innumerable calls from so many producers with a horror concept, mythology based, folklore based. If you have horror, I am doing horror again as a series, hopefully, but I didn't say yes to any of those things because it needs to come from a very deep need to tell that particular story in that particular way. Not every story will lend itself to horror. So for me, the kind of horror I do is something that I can do in a series in a different way, but I don't think that I need to ride that wave of horror because I'm not lending my craft to horror in that specific way. But I do understand why. Look, what I do and what OTT has done with horror is very different than what theatrical horror is. There is, when you're watching on OTT, anything, that you're giving it that time, you're giving it that patience, you're building those characters so that they stay from one episode to the next, from 1 hour to the next, from one season to the next, So there is a kind of different engagement. There is even a discomfort. I don't think, the theatrical audience is looking, or the producers are not looking for making the theatrical audience engage in that kind of emotion, like for Cough. I don't think they're looking to make that uncomfortable an audience, I think they are very much in the horror comedy, in a different kind of a zone where they think that, again, if horror things are of two kinds. One is, say, Blumhouse, and the other is like A24. I think we are still where we are looking at horror as a thrill ride, where it's thrilling, where it's engaging, when it's entertaining. There's a little bit of spectacle also over there. There's a little bit of laugh, family can go. So it's a different kind of horror, and yes, that's looking like it's going to give returns.
So would you say that the OTT has offered you more creative freedom as a writer? Or, Anurag Kashyap has been cursing Netflix and all these guys, but as a writer personally, as a creative person, do you feel that it offers you more creative freedom?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, you have a story, and the way I did Cough, I mean, it was very, very difficult to kind of, it's very easy to pitch an idea, you know. It's for different people, it's different, but at least for me, it's very easy to pitch an idea, to pitch a premise. You have a hostel, you have a haunted hostel, you have girls trapped inside. It's very easy. The difficulty is in how you're treating it, the kinds of things you're trying to say. You know, this is what I meant, that if you do a Conjuring, you know, it's a different thing as when you try to do a Hereditary, you know. So I think the good thing about the OTT, that, I mean, with Amazon, that I went through, at some point, they realized that this is a very individual vision, this is a very unique voice, and we stand by that. And from that point, there was no turning back. So I think if you're going to look at horror stories, the kind of, or any good content for that matter, what you're going to gain is from people bringing in their unique point of views, you know. So with horror also, I mean, when you say Indian or Western, I would say one thing, that you look at horror outside, you know, someone comes to haunt you. I think you also have to look at the psychological side of horror, right?
Yes.
So where, if there is an inward gaze and there is an outward gaze, I think the Western or Indian, I would look at it as like the booth is coming from outside, something is, and then there is an inward gaze of horror, that there's more psychological understanding of horror, you know, something like Babadook, something like The Wailing, which is looking at what is happening to a village, what is happening to a father and daughter. So yeah, just to wrap it up, I think there are people in OTT who are giving it they do, where they are looking at investing in people, in creatives, in storytellers, which is the more A24 way. And then there is a theatrical, which is looking at, you know, very different kinds of horror.
This is for Yogesh. As a screenwriter, you've explored multiple genres, including thrillers with psychological depth. How do you tap into the cultural and social anxieties as a writer when you write a script?
Difficult question. I mean, I've never thought of it this way, but like, my starting point for any story is to first crack what's the core, like what's that human story that will actually connect with the audience. And then, I mean, sometimes it starts with that. Sometimes it starts with like, okay, in Munja, I wanted to tell a story that my grandfather used to tell me. Ki aise, there is a ghost who's bound to a tree and it kind of latches onto you and then it gets bound to you. So that started with that one legend. And then I kind of figured out, you know, what is the human story? What is the story of the boy on whom the ghost gets latched onto? Whereas when I was writing the sequel for Tumbad, I already had a brief wherein I kind of knew that I have to write a story which is about greed, like greed being the curse on a particular family. So then my task there was to again figure out like a human story and like figure out how accessible I can make that mythology to audiences by telling a simple story. So it's always like first cracking, like, you know, what is it that engages the audience, and then, I mean, everything else kind of becomes the garnish. But you keep on, it's like, I think it's more than garnish. I mean, you keep on, it's more like the raw material. You keep on exploring and finding and discovering new things. There's a lot of research. Like, a lot of subtext kind of arrives once, you know, you start, like, for example, in Munja, like, I mean, it started with this very kiddish story, but then when I started like researching the actual legend in Konkan and all that, I found out that these spirits, basically, they die at a certain age where they are about to hit puberty. And like, when the legend actually came about, child marriages were quite prevalent in that era. So, unka jo atript ichha rehta hai, like the unfulfilled wish they have, is often to get married. So when they become these Brahma Rakshas, the first thing they'll do is like they want a girl. Like they'll start playing pranks on girls. They want a bride technically. So this information came later, and then it kind of like, you know, took shape of like he's come here in like the real world and he still wants a girl. So that's how like the whole story shaped up. So I think each project is different, so automatically, I mean, you end up figuring it out as you go along.
So this question is for Deepak. The Ramsays have had such a long legacy in Indian horror. What does it take to reinvent horror for a new age audience, and while retaining the emotionalism of a melodrama, Indian melodrama?
I think once again the story is very important. The storytelling itself. Technicals come in later. I mean, unless you don't have something important to say or you get your audience hooked on, there's nothing about horror. Besides the story, I think going forward, prosthetics, makeup, VFX, and even AI, though a lot of people don't like AI, I think it's going to play a very important role in the future. And with regards to keeping emotion in place, it has to connect with people. I mean, otherwise, there's no story if there's no connect. Then you're just creating a film. So I think all these factors will play a very important role going forward.
The next question is for Patrick. How do you integrate local myths and anxieties into a globally accessible horror narrative? Considering you made Betal and Ghoul, which had the Islamic and Hindu myths attached to it.
Well, with those two projects in particular, and I think in general across most of the work that I've done, I would probably just find a subject which at that time is kind of annoying me. I think as a person, I'm driven a lot by anger because I'm quite a petty person. But basically, it's like, what's making me angry? What's going to make me passionate enough to tell that story, right? So in the sense of Ghoul, it was the kind of early stages of the rise of the right wing, which is now, of course, won. But that was what was interesting me at the time. At the same time, there was the release of this redacted CIA files on enhanced interrogation techniques. So those are the things that I was like, Christ, this is really messed up, right? So that was driving the passion behind that. And then it was about finding a character who I was pissed off with and I wanted to teach a lesson. And then finding the monster came after that. And similarly with Betal, there was stuff I was reading in the papers about the CRPF campaigns of intimidation and terror against local tribal communities, and that obviously struck a chord with me. And then comparing that with the East India Company and their behavior back in the day, and I just thought that kind of made a good kind of horror. And it was really just an excuse to have redcoat zombies, but whatever. So yeah, it's kind of what am I passionate about first? What do I want to make a point about? And then horror comes after that.
Smita, what draws you to the horror space, and do you see it as a mirror to social anxieties? And does horror have to be provoking? Yeah.
Firstly, I have to say this exactly what Patrick said is what drives me. And I think you've made the two things that I would have liked to make. And so every time I think about these two things, I go, okay, he's dealt with colonialism also, he's dealt with this also, he's dealt with that. So no, it's exactly that. What is making me angry? And what is really... Where does trauma come from? I think horror for me is also one way to analyze that, to look at that. And I have kind of a larger canvas, I think. I know I enjoy slasher films as well. I enjoy all kinds of horror, okay? That's just for like an immediate release. I would watch that. But I think at some point I would dig a little deeper. Like, for example, I'll again give you... It started with Rosemary's Baby, and then you look at something like Booth. For me, I think it says something about a woman in a modern city, isolated, in a marriage, she doesn't know where it's going. I think it would give me, if I were to do the same thing, if you would give me the same canvas, I would add a lot more layers and colors to it and see that what exactly would make this isolation happen. What are the other things that is driving that isolation in that woman, and what are the pressures? So I would do that. if you would give me a story about a curse, about a powerful family, I would look at where that power comes from, where the curse comes from, what would lead to that rage, what would lead to that. So I would kind of engage with a lot more themes, because themes are really important to me. I think before anything comes, I need to know why I'm telling this story. You know, तो वो डर कहाँ से आ रहा है, वो फियर कहाँ से आ रहा है, उसके लिए मेरे अंदर अशांति कहाँ से आ रही है, ढूंढना बहुत ज़रूरी है.
So you mentioned A24 and Blumhouse. What would it take for us to get to that level where our films are, universally recognized?
But I mean, see, when you talk about an Indian film, you have a Stree and you also have a Brahmayogam. Now you tell me which is an Indian film. You can't say that Indian film, because Brahmayogam is as Indian as Stree is. It's just that how many people are watching that, and how many people are even aware that a Brahmayogam exists. We have to solve that, I think, before we solve anything else. And to your question, this is the thing that we need to understand. And I think beyond genre, beyond horror, why is A24? Because they backed the creator. They backed the storytelling, they backed the vision. Otherwise, you would not have a Hereditary, you would not have an Ari Aster. You have Blumhouse, and that's great. I mean, there is a fine commercial precision to what Blumhouse does.
But it's like you pick your team, you pick your creatives, you pick your artists, and you give them what they need. You give them the trust that they are good at their jobs and that they're going to make something good, and then you let them do it. Too often in this industry, film and television and OTT, you're being told what to do, you're being given explicit feedback from people who don't know what they're talking about, especially when it comes to horror. I'm sorry, I'm going to start saying controversial things now, but yeah. For all of us. Yeah, I mean, it's like, why am I being told about horror by someone who knows nothing about horror?
Exactly.
You okay?
I mean, I would like to add, I have kind of, for the last few years been pitching around, being in meetings for, horror films on the big screen. And the one thing that always keeps coming up is, story अच्छा है, but hero कौन रहेगा? So we are a star-led kind of an industry, and we always first look at if we want a bankable film in the theaters, we think of कि अरे ये hero रहेगा तो इतना पैसा कमाएगा, इतना opening मिलेगा and all that. To be very honest, I personally feel that horror is a star-proof genre. I mean, you go to watch, when I was a kid, we would go to watch a Ramsey film, not for Hemant Birje or Deepak Parashar. We would like to see Samri or who's the monster. It's as simple as that. A Tumbad works despite a Soham Shah who's not like Ranbir Kapoor, is because we all want to see Hastar and we are curious about that. So that is something that producers and studios need to understand, that as they say, they have to back voices, new voices. They have to understand that, the story is the key. The content is the king. And if you're backing it, if you're taking a risk on that, of course you are bound to get returns. But if you kind of stick for a actor ka dates agle saal hai, and till then the hero, again, a very interesting point which Deepak made backstage regarding why heroes kind of have problem being heroes in horror films. I would like to
So when we had these films made, and of course it would go to distributors and stuff, and they would say, "कौन है आपकी पिक्चर में? अमिताभ बच्चन है, धर्मेंद्र है, कौन है?" And my dad would say, "नहीं, इसमें तो सामरी है." And that is our hero. And you see the movie, and then you buy the movie. I mean, our horror was so confident. I mean, our product was so confident that it would get the audiences. And like Patrick just said, that a lot of people do, the youngsters, whatever, the newly educated creatives, you sit down across them and they do try to teach you, and we can't even say that we are 40-45 years down in the industry, and we listen quietly and we take in what's good, and that's the thing to do.
I think it's just that studios, producers, they need to back new voices, new content, and take more risks, and also like look at a variety. I mean, the audiences today with OTT and all, they are seeing all kinds of stuff. Like all across the world, we are seeing films with subtitles and all that. So we know, like, you know, कि अच्छा ये type का भी horror film हो सकता है, ये हो सकता है. So the market is quite open for different kinds of horror films to come out. So we just have to tap into it.
Can I just add one more thing as well, which is just recently kind of, you know, being part of the pitching scene, trying to figure out what opportunities are out there. I have seen a movement by producers towards a model where we can make kind of cheaper horror films that, you know, slightly more manageable production-wise, which I think is a good thing because you can make horror for cheap. It's okay. I think one of the biggest problems that we all face is that star issue. How many projects get kind of hamstrung by the fact that suddenly, oh, you need a star, but you don't need a star. You just don't. Like, how many projects that I've been a part of where it's like, well, you need one of these 7 stars. None of them are right for the part. That doesn't matter. Most of them are 20 years too old, but we still need one of these stars. And it's like, when did that become the norm with horror?
The other thing I would like to add, like just one last thing. Sure. We have a huge double-edged sword in the industry right now, which are the horror comedies. Like, of course, like a Stree kind of opened up the market, but what followed is like a spate of like these films which call themselves horror comedies, but they're technically just comedies with some supernatural elements. Like, you take out the comedy, there is nothing left. Like, for a good comedy, horror comedy to like work, personally, I feel like you take out the horror, the comedy has to work. You take out the comedy, the horror has to work. So I just feel that producers need to stop, you know, like giving into that herd mentality of आपके पास कुछ horror comedy है क्या? Like everybody right now wants to make a horror comedy because they think that they'll make the kind of money that a Stree made. So that is one thing that we need to kind of look beyond.
I think the fact that Karan Johar made Kill, which was a very small movie, probably led him to believe that, you know, there is a medium for small budget movies that can create the kind of effect, and he made his money on that. So here's hoping that the industry will start changing slowly and start accepting more creative preferences rather than economical preferences. So what kind of subgenres of horror do you think we can introduce to the Indian audience which will work? Giving an example of folk horror, cosmic horror, technology horror.
Okay, I want to see an alien invasion horror. That's what I want. I want to see some aliens. Forget folklore and mythology. Let's see some aliens. At some point, there needs to be some aliens. We haven't had any Indian.
No, there is a movie called Wahan Ke Log, which was made in the 1960s.
Oh, yeah?
And it had an alien invasion in India. Yes?
Okay, I have no idea about this film,
Yeah.
but I will search it out.
Something to add?
Any kind of horror, I mean, I would just love to watch it. So, like, but again, as I said, like, we need a variety. Like, you know, like, we should explore different kind of genres. Like, folk horror is something I really like. I mean, when I say folk horror, I mean the British folk horror, like from like Wicker Man and Blood on Satan's Claw, those kind of films. I think they have a tremendous potential to kind of be done in an Indian setting with our own beliefs and superstitions and stuff like that. And the other thing, it's actually a guilty pleasure. I love found footage horror films, and I feel like somewhere, like, you know, here that has never been explored to a good extent. So there is still potential, because again, it's like it requires a lot of work, but technically it requires like lesser means. So like aspiring filmmakers, new filmmakers, it's a great opportunity for them to kind of explore that genre, and like it's a good way of discovering new voices through that genre.
Deepak?
I think I would like to see a nice creature feature. You know, a 7-foot monster, probably this time faster than our usual Samri is. And yeah, something like that has not come for a very long time, and I think it's got potential, if done well.
Smita?
I think any story well told, to be honest, any story well told, done in a good way. I mean, take horror seriously. It has so much to do. One thing about horror is that, you need in your cinematic, every tool that you can get is what works with with horror. You need to set an atmosphere, you need to do so much. So I think cinema also needs to, come up to give horror its due.
Personally, I think science fiction is a very less traded genre in India, and technological horror. I mean, the government is snatching our freedoms day by day, so maybe a horror movie on that lines.
I think also one other thing that it would be quite nice to see is some horror which is more kind of down to earth. And I think Smita with Koff, that it was like that, right? It was a kind of it was not kind of overblown and over sensationalized. It was down to earth horror. I think it would be nice to kind of see other, I don't know, like kind of a horror set in the slums, for example.
Yes.
Like something which is there is daily horror in India that is not explored through the current horror that we're seeing. Just visceral, down-to-earth reality, because that's what horror is at the end of the day, isn't it? If you take away the supernatural aspect, it's still horrific, right?
Yes, it is.
I feel like we kind of overblow the horror so much, where it could be much more kind of low-key.
Anybody wants to add anything else before I give the audience a chance to ask their questions? So, yeah, I'm just... Can we get a mic over there? You can use.
Hi, thanks for this talk. I'm a lover of the genre, and as a cinematographer, I love the genre because it gives me a lot of expressive tools. But I wanted to ask you something, whoever would like to answer. I've seen the fading out of a genre, a sub-genre that we grew up, my generation grew up with, which was the franchise based on, you want to call it the anti-hero, you could say Jason, Leatherface, in Italian we call it Nightmare, but Freddy Krueger basically. So why is that? The last one being Scream, I guess, was the last, if you would ask, must. Why is that so? And you think there might be a resurgence of this subgenre? What is your opinion about this?
Well, I think Maddock films are making their own cinematic universe with their various creations. So I mean, I suppose that's kind of similar. But in fact, a lot of the films that you're talking about are slasher films, right? And I don't think we've really seen that recently, if I'm not mistaken. Not recently.
Okay,
Kali.
sure.
Okay. But I think. Okay. So like, yeah, it would be great to have those kind of slasher franchises if they worked. I'm not sure.
One of the reasons why the slasher films kind of faded away in popularity was that most of them had the same story. Like, there is a mass killer and then there's a bunch of youngsters. Yeah, and then they get killed one by one. And then, which Scream actually explored very well with, the black guy dying first and then the final girl and all that. So after a point, I think people just kind of grew tired of watching the same film. But there have been some recent films which kind of have tried to turn the whole genre on its head. Like last year there was that one film, In Violent Nature, which is actually shot from the masked killer's perspective.
Yes.
And then there are others, like there is another movie that came out this year called Clown in the Cornfield, which again kind of tries to do certain things with the genre. So I think if somebody finds a way of reinventing it, it is the kind of genre that kind of works, because these slasher killers, they are like, they become iconic pretty soon. Like they had one, Samri, like, and Mahakal mein also
Mahakal.
they had but Samri was very popular in India. Like, I mean, everybody kind of at that point in time knew Samri.
In fact, me and Deepak are going to be recording a part for it's called the Slasher Trash documentary that's happening. It's being done by the Hollywood guys. So there's going to be a 6-hour documentary on only slashers, and that too all the slashers that are very rare to find. Yes.
Yeah, so my question was to Patrick regarding Ghol. So I really loved the project and it scared me. So I wanted to ask you that, how was the experience? Like, did you feel more free as an artist doing that project than any other project of yours, like post that?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting because I feel like I was slightly spoilt with Ghoul because it was Phantom Films at the time, and at that moment in history, Phantom Films was like the place for cinephiles, and you were working there at the same time. Like it had this kind of environment which was very fostering and nurturing to the creative talent that they were bringing in. And I was very lucky to be supported by people like Vikram Motwani, et cetera, who just let me get on with it. I haven't really had that since, honestly. And I feel like that was that project, I'm very happy with how it turned out. I feel like the part of the reason why I am happy with it is because of just the amount of freedom I was allowed. The other thing was just purely by luck and chance. Netflix picked it up when Netflix was still trying to be provocative and controversial. So they were like, yeah, go for it, make it controversial, which just that simply wouldn't happen nowadays. So it was just like being in the right place at the right time. And that hasn't occurred since, really.
Looking forward for more.
1 second, that lady had one.
Looking
I'm
forward
just
for
sorry
more.
to intervene. We'll take one last question for the day from the lady there, and we can take the rest offline. I think we've brewed a lot of conversations for the day and have lost track of time. The show's closed. We'll just take one last question then and close for the day. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I am not a horror watcher. I mean, I don't go for horror movies. Because there have been like daily life incidences in our families and all where I feel, even I don't allow my kids to go, but they go watch Conjuring and I'm all scared at home while they are watching in the theater. So I just want to ask, you said that, Yogesh, that we like to watch horror while it's not affecting us because we just want to watch it from far. So while you're writing your scripts, do you really make an effort, or do you think on those lines that you don't want to involve the audience at that level that they will really get scared? I mean, I just want to know that.
I do want the audience to get scared. It's like just that, I don't want to harm them. That's the only thing. I mean, I don't want to write some film using black magic where the killer will come out of the screen and start killing the audience. But, I kind of like, I don't want to name, I had a conversation with a filmmaker and he once told me that I want to make horror films which even my 5-year-old daughter can enjoy. Now, that's quite a good thought, but then not all horror films can be that, because technically horror and fear, horror films and fear, they go hand in hand. So, I kind of, as far as possible, I try not to pull the punches and make it as scary as possible, depending on, of course, like what my brief is or like what kind of audience I'm trying to write to. But that's about it. But then sometimes, because I stay alone and I write alone, most of the times I try to not scare myself too much. So I kind of like try to find that balance somehow.
You do try to not scare. Can I say that you guys don't try to scare?
I think, see.
I think... hello.
Yeah.
one of my personal ambitions is for somebody to have a heart attack in one of my films. I mean, they don't have to die, but as long as there's a heart attack.
So,
Yeah.
so I think it was Purana Mandir where they had an ambulance outside the theatre. Darwaza, where they had an ambulance outside the theatre in case anybody had a heart attack. For the last show. I have a point to make. I think horror is a catharsis for a lot of stuff that you would like to do, but it's like the joyride. Like I said, you go up the roller coaster and come down, you feel the fear, and it gets out of you. So never be scared to introduce kids to horror. Of course, depending on the age. But horror, I mean, we are all sane people. We have dark imagery in our heads, but we live like normal human beings as well. So that's my point.
We've actually had some chilling conversations here. It was interesting to see how we've articulated this conversation around the haunted market of content and the global appetite for fear. With that, may I please request an AD, Assistant Manager, Abyss Show, to present the grocery certificates to our dignitaries on the stage. Ankita, may we please have the certificates? Allow us to just present a small token of gratitude. We'll go in the ascending order. This stays in line with our sustainability initiative at Nuremberg Messe India. We've taken a small green step in planting a tree for the tigers at the Sundarbans with the Grow Trees NGO. Thank you for being a part of our efforts to combat the change with the climate. We'll have one group picture with the panelists and our moderator along with an AD. Can we please have all of you for one group picture? And with that, we close day one of the Content India Conference 2025. A day that was filled with ideas, insights and inspiration, celebrating the storytellers shaping tomorrow's entertainment landscape.